Yeah, welcome from me. My name's Maitrikumara. I live here at the centre and part of the Dharma Night team. So this evening we're carrying on with this series we've been doing on the Tantric path. And this evening I'm going to be talking about mantra and mantric sound. So Kusala Sara a few months ago asked me would I do a talk on it, on this series, and which of the subjects would I like to talk about. Admittedly, there are only two left, so I only had a choice of two. And mantra has been a very big part of, it's a very big part of Buddhist practice and how we practice here at the London Buddhist Centre. And it's been a very big part of my practice over the last few years. But in a way, it's been something that I've not. It's something that I've not fully turned my attention to, or something. It's like I've not really reflected on or really delved into much. So I saw it as a sort of an opportunity to really do that in my practice. So that's what I've been doing over the last few months, and hopefully I'll be able to have something to share with you, worthwhile, that you'll get from it. And so I'm going to talk for a little while, and then after that we'll do some chanting. We'll chant some mantra, and that will be the shape of this. I don't know how long I'm going to talk for, but at some point we will chant some mantras, if anyone was hoping for mantras. So in a way, I mean, sound and mantric sound. In a way, sound was sort of my way into Buddhism. In a way, into the spiritual life. So before I sort of came across the Dharma fully, or came across the Buddhist Centre, I was studying music. I was a bit of I was a music nerd, and studying music at music college. I played saxophone. I still play saxophone, and at these sort of music colleges, you're just all you have to do is practice your instrument, and that's your task. That's your purpose in life for 4 years or 5 years. It's your purpose is to practice your music and get into the depths of music, get into the nitty gritty. And it was great. I loved it. That's all I had to do is what I loved doing. I mean, it definitely had its ups and downs, as does everything, and difficulties. But what really intrigued me when I was at music college, and what I couldn't get my head around, was the sort of magic and the sort of mystery of sound and of music, because I could analyse away and listen to something and analyse things to bits and say, oh, that's that technique, that's this harmonic device, that's that. And then I could learn to play it and I could learn to do it over and over. But somehow that doesn't translate necessarily to like a really moving performance. For instance, I can get really technically good at music and people, get really technically good, know all the ins and outs of it. But for some reason, if I listen to a Bob Dylan recording, it's all out of time. His voice is all a bit untrained. But somehow it's completely moving, can move you to tears. I remember going to see a saxophone player who is one of my heroes, called Archie Shepp. And he's quite old now. When I got to see him, he was very frail, sort of helped onto the stage. And I sort of had this thought when I sat there, like, is this going to be any good? I really like his recordings from like the 70s and stuff. And is this actually going to be good, or is this just like a name and that's how they take it? And he opened with a piece which I know very well and played many times and heard many times. And so I sat there with the sort of sceptical, is this going to be good? He played the first 3 notes and I just burst into tears. I just found it so moving. So from studying music, I was kind of left with a question of like how, I can't analyse away and practice depth into music, and sound and music has depth to it, which you can't somehow can't analyse. And practicing at music college, studying at music college wasn't providing me the answers, and I think it was definitely a strong start for me wanting to sort of look into the spiritual life, and I eventually came along to the Buddhist Centre. So hopefully that's going to be what we're sort of exploring tonight, is that sort of almost quest, or that questioning to that sort of mystery and the magic of sound, the depth that can come with sound. So this series, the Tantric Path, the Tantric series that we're looking at, you can say the Tantric Path is one part of one of the sort of three main phases of Buddhism. So we've gone over this a few times, so I won't go into it much. So we first stage being the Hinayana, the second stage being the Mahayana, and the third stage, which the Tantric Path is part of, is the Vajrayana. So if I compare it to the Mahayana and where that quickly, so the Mahayana is often called, or not often called, but can be called the Paramitayana, and so that means it's the way of the perfections, the practicing of these perfections. So some of you might have heard about the Paramitas. So some people have heard about the 6 Paramitas, which are the practices or the perfections that a bodhisattva practices over one's career. A bodhisattva career. So giving, morality, patience, energy, meditation and wisdom. What's writing down just in case? Yes. But so these are these things: patience, morality, generosity. And what it gives, the Mahayana or the Paramitayana, the way of practicing this, is a whole spiritual path, a whole path of spiritual development and growth in practicing those qualities. And so that's for the Mahayana, or sometimes called the Paramitayana. The Vajrayana is sometimes called, so this is the phase that we're concerned in, the next phase of Buddhism. The Vajrayana is sometimes called the Mantrayana, the way or the vehicle of the mantra. So there's one main difference which I want to highlight, which is the Paramitayana, or the Mahayana, all those practices for development of those qualities are directed towards or concerned with the conscious mind, whereas the Mantrayana is concerned with or directed towards contacting the unconscious depths in us. Okay? So, what does that mean? Contacting the unconscious depths. And the way of the mantra is the way of contacting the unconscious depths. So I was on a retreat recently at Padmaloka Retreat Centre. So some of you might have been to Padmaloka Retreat Centre, and I was there for 9 days. And at the start of the retreat, I sort of realised that a big focus of the retreat was going to be mantra, or there was a lot that was talked about and a lot of what we were doing. And I said to the person leading it, Padmavajra, who some of you will know, I talked to Padmavajra and I said, it's actually a part of my practice, Padmavajra, I'm not sure I've quite connected with, or it seems a bit of a mystery to me, like it's very prominent, but it just seems a bit of a mystery. And so what he said to me, just said, okay, for this whole retreat, just chant mantras and tell me how that goes. So for 5 sits a day, for 9 days for that whole retreat, I just sat there chanting the mantras. And a lot happened. And a lot happened. But contacting these unconscious depths, I don't know how one would describe it, but if you I might describe it as, I'm not sure if you've had this feeling of sort of, not on the surface of your experience, but underneath there's sort of, you feel like there's a shift, or where you've come to a point in your life where you feel a shift. I think it's like sometimes it's, I don't know if you've come to a point in your life where everything you're doing is good and enjoyable, but you feel a need for a change or some sort of shift. I remember before I moved into the Buddhist center, I was studying music, really enjoying that. I was living with some friends in a really nice house, nicest house I'd ever lived in, really good living situation, doing what I really enjoyed, playing music, touring with bands. And yet there felt like I needed to do something different. It coincided with someone suggesting, why don't I come and try living here at the Buddhist Center in one of the communities. And it felt like on paper, it wasn't really a logical, I just had a list of pros, in a way, but it still felt like an unconscious. Does anyone resonate with that? It felt like you come to a point, and it's not that you make a decision like based on pros and cons and what you want to do. It just feels like there needs to be some sort of shift or change. I think it can show up in relationships, sort of when relationships sometimes just change or something like that happens in a relationship. And so when I was on this retreat, chanting mantra day in, day out, that is the kind of change that I've sort of started to experience. I'm sure a lot of us have been on retreat, and there can be times on retreat where it's really, the effects of the retreat are really at the forefront of our experience, and we can sort of walk out the shrine room a bit like, sort of, everyone sort of, you see 50 people walking up very slowly and like picking up leaves and like sort of cliches of being on retreat. It's amazing when you're in it. You don't feel very self-conscious when you're in it. It's fun. It felt more like practicing mantra. It felt much more, not on the surface, but something in the depths were changing or shifting. And it's because of this, and it said that the mantrayana is supposed to bring much more rapid change and progress in one's practice. Because instead of contacting or sort of aiming at the conscious mind, it's aiming towards our more unconscious steps. So, and what it does when we're contacting these unconscious depths, it's contacting spiritual forces, a bit like what Amelie Odin was just talking about in the first half. He was talking about that. You could think of the Buddha image. We've got an image of green Tara, which is an image some of you might be familiar with, or it might be the first time you're encountering this image. It's an image of a bodhisattva, another enlightened being, and it's much more. And Amelie Odin was saying they're much more than just an image for instance, for our potential. You can think of them as like an image for our potential, but also they exist as something much more than that. What they are, these images, they're crystallizations of different aspects of the enlightened mind, which are latent in our unconscious depths. So, yes, we can relate to them as images of one's potential and these enlightened aspects, which Amelie Odin was sort of evoking and talking about. So, for instance, we've got green Tara on the shrine, and she's sort of an image of she's like the quintessence of compassion. So, there's so much to say about this image, and it's one that's dear to my heart. And she's sort of got a hand in one mudra of generosity, and she's got one leg in meditation and one stepping down into the world, sort of with her hand reaching out, stepping down into the world to help beings move towards enlightenment. And she's an image of compassion, and she's also an image of fearlessness. So she sort of represents those, you could say she represents those two aspects of enlightened mind or qualities. So you could think of it as an image representing those at their fullest. But also, like I say, those qualities and those aspects of the enlightened mind, those facets, are also spiritual forces which are sort of alive in the world and latent in our unconscious depths. And these images that we come across are like crystallizations of that. You can think of them also. There was in that sort of beautiful meditation we just did, there was the image of the white light. You think of the white light, for instance, being like the enlightened mind, and as you sort of shine that through a prism, is that right? Yeah, right through a prism, it refracts. Is that the right word? Refracts into all the different colours, the spectrum, and it's a bit like all these different bodhisattva images. So, for instance, like green Tara is an aspect of that white light, of that enlightened mind, crystallized in that form. You could also think of it in colour, crystallizing. So, there's lots of green. I like wearing green. There's green on the shrine. It's sort of like the colour is important as well. So for that crystallization. And so there's these latent spiritual forces in our conscious depths, and that's what the Mantrayana or the Vajrayana is concerned with, of contacting. And we did that sort of, a way of doing that was sort of how Amelie Oden led us through earlier. And we do that by visualizing, so you can bring to mind images like that, or how we did it brought to mind during meditation, and invocation, and we invoke them using mantra and mantric sound. And that's, if you like, the mantra is, I'll get onto that. What is a mantra? That's really what this talks about, so I'll get onto that. So that's how we invoke the mantric sound. So what's a mantra? I mean, I'll go through break down a mantra, sort of from the sort of more mundane things to the more, like I say, sort of mysterious or magical element, or seemingly magical element. So first of all, if you get a mantra, so let's say we get the Tara mantra, since she's on the shrine, and I think we'll chant that later. So you've got this string of syllables, really, so Om Tare, Tu Tare, Ture Svaha. You've got a string of syllables. Sometimes the syllables come together to make words like Tare and Tu Tare. And their syllables, they come from the Sanskrit alphabet. And so that's what they are, really. That's what it is, a string of syllables. Sometimes they come together to make words. But the words and the syllables aren't really translatable or worth analysing. You can't really analyse a mantra, or you can't analyse a mantra. It's just sound. They're sort of sound syllables. Sometimes they come together to make words. So we might have chanted Om Mani Padme Hum, which means the jewel in the lotus. So it translates as the jewel in the lotus. But even then, that's just one aspect of that mantra, or just a sort of aspect of it. It's not the whole picture. So mantras are these. All they are these sort of, on one level, is just these sort of collection of syllables, sometimes come together to make words, but then which aren't susceptible to sort of logical analysis. Okay. And what they are, one way of thinking about them, is a bit like what I think Emily Odin mentioned is you can think of them as a sound symbol for whichever divinity or figure it is you're trying to invoke or evoke. So that was the Tara mantra. So this is, if that spiritual force crystallized into form and colour, it would be green and it would be in the form of Tara. Yeah? And if it crystallized into sound, then it would be the sound Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Re Svaha. So that it's the sound of that divinity. So when you chant it, it's like calling the name. I think Emily only mentioned it's like calling the name. So when you chant it, it's like bringing the image to mind. It's like bringing the image to mind, but via sound. So Tara is present in the room in form and colour on the shrine. And then when we chant the mantra, it's like we bring, she somehow becomes present in the sound, in the form of sound as well. So those are aspects, sort of important things of mantra. There are these syllables, so there's no use in trying to analyse them. They're a sound symbol for what it is we're trying to invoke or evoke. And the main thing, or the mystery part, is that the mantra is given by the guru, or by your guru. So that's a different part, and this is where it sort of sets aside. So we can have mantra and we chant it here at the centre, and we chant it in pujas. We're going to chant some later. But tantric recitation of mantra, this is the aspect of mantra which sets tantric recitation aside from it being just another a good sort of religious Buddhist practice. And so it's given by the guru, and so in our tradition, or any tradition I think, a mantra is what is given at the moment of ordination, when someone is ordained into that tradition. So you'll see some of us are wearing these cases if you've not been to the centre before. So this means we've been ordained into the Triratna Buddhist community, order and community. And I was ordained just over a year ago. And before I was ordained, and even after it, we were given quite a bit of advice, and it sort of seemed quite open advice, or quite. So some things are sort of like it might take you, or little hints that people drop in. Things like it might take you a couple of years to settle back from your ordination, or settle down for it and get settled, which seemed a bit of a strange thing to say, or a bit of a mysterious thing to say. In fact, sometimes it said you sort of have a period of 5 years after your ordination to really settle and settle from it and take it in. And having gone through it and having being a year on, I can see why I was given such advice, or people are given such advice. Ordination sort of marks a commitment in a way. It's a commitment to practicing the Dharma, practicing Buddhism for the rest of one's life. It's sort of saying, I'm going to practice this and work towards enlightenment for the benefit of others within this community for the rest of my life. That's the commitment one is making. And another commitment people do at the centre is people can become mitras. So a friend of mine became a mitra recently, and it's sort of a declaration of. So I know a lot of you will be mitras here. It's sort of a declaration of saying you feel yourself to be a Buddhist, and you want to practice in this community and practice the precepts and keep deepening your practice. And my friend became a mitra recently, and he was just saying what it meant to him. And in a sense, it's a bit of a personal commitment, and it can mean something. It can mean something to the individual. Ordination is slightly different. because it's also a sort of an element of initiation in it. And when one is sort of stepping into ordination, I'll just talk a little bit about how I've experienced it. It's a bit like stepping into, a bit like we've been talking about these sort of spiritual forces in the unconscious depths. It's a bit like you're stepping into a stream of these sort of spiritual energy and power, sort of power and energy, which is, you're stepping into a lineage of that. So there's many different schools of Buddhism, and you tend to deepen your practice within one. And that's because it's for many reasons, but one aspect is you're stepping into, at ordination, a stream of this sort of spiritual energy, which is sort of being passed through the lineage and is passed on by, in our case, the preceptor, the person who ordains someone. That spiritual energy is passed on through in that ordination. And that sort of energy is transmitted and passed on through the giving of a mantra. So this is going to the mystical, magical, mysterious part. So that sort of energy is passed on through the mantra. And when, maybe I'll pause there quickly just to see if there's any questions, because I've sort of spoken for quite a while now. Any questions there? Yeah, go on.
Do you ever find that with tapping into unconscious energies, there's a huge array of energies there? It's not all light and liberation. It can be darkness, wildness.
Yeah, well, I think what we often find when we start practicing is that all sorts of things that you didn't expect come up. And actually what you start to realise as you go deeper into your practice, what we start to realise is there's just so much more to us than we realise, and there's so much more depth, and it's not like you sort of, every part that you sort of uncover, there's sort of vast depths which are more and more mysterious. And it's not like when you go on a retreat, you get, you go on retreat and you sort of get happy and you sort of get relaxed. That can happen. But also you're stepping into the unknown. You're stepping into a bit of a mystery because you're stepping into more of your unconscious depths. And, it's a bit like that sort of with mantra and with practice, and when you're any kind of commitment, whenever you commit to going on retreat or practicing, you're moving more towards those sort of unconscious depths. And so it's not like you can work that out, but ultimately it's sort of incredibly fulfilling. And what you sort of think you might have wanted from practice, like light and bliss, what you think you might have wanted actually starts to change. Your idea of what you might want starts to change. Yeah. Any more? Yeah, go on, Pete.
When you were talking about on the retreat doing mantras for the whole retreat, was that like silently, or were you actually chanting in the room?
Yes. So yeah, for me, silently in meditation.
Right.
And then, but then also in part as part of ritual as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll go on because we will get on to just doing some mantra now and chanting some mantra. So yeah, like I say, it's sort of tantric recitation and that sort of mantra. You can find mantra in books. You can read mantras. We teach it here at the centre. But as far as the tantric path is concerned, real tantric recitation of mantra begins or starts or is open to you at the point of initiation, at the point of ordination. And then that sort of, the mantra practice sort of takes on, mantra recitation sort of takes on sort of different life, in a way. It really starts to, that's what the Vajrayana, the mantrayana, the path of the mantra is going towards. Go on.
Question, sorry. Is the mantra sort of specified to you in the same way that the name that you're given will be? Is sort of something you're aiming for?
No, so good question. No, so it's not like we each get a specific mantra. You take on the mantra of a bodhisattva or Buddha figure that that you are moved by or feel a connection with. So, I sort of go into analysing about all the different aspects of green Tara here in the shrine, and you could do it with any figure. But the main important part really is seeing a figure that you're attracted to or that you're moved by. And because each of them are an aspect of the enlightened mind. If you like, it's a skillful means of the enlightened mind appearing in a form, crystallizing in a form which is attractive to you, and that you want to dwell upon. So you're given the mantra. So the mantra I was given at ordination was the Tara mantra, which I was chanting before, and which we'll chant in a moment now. But there's something mysterious that happens at the point of ordination, which can't be described until you do it. And all people can say about it really is give yourself a couple years afterwards to settle down afterwards. There's something mysterious and magical, something of these spiritual forces that are sort of in the world and latent in our unconscious depths, which somehow sort of come more apparent or something like that, or come into one's more experience more, something like that. It's a bit mysterious, but there you go. Okay, is that good? Yeah. Okay, so we'll but like I say, so that's tantric recitation of mantra, but one can still practice mantra, and we still do practice mantra, and it's still a very good practice to do. It's still a way of invoking and bringing to mind these different figures. So what we'll do is we'll chant it in a moment, and we're going to chant it in a certain way. What we're going to chant is we're going to chant it not to a tune or a melody. So one thing that, going back to music and sound, it can be very, I mean, some of you might have be quite familiar with Tara, and you might look at the shrine and go, that is an image of Tara. I know that. We come to the Metta Bhavana practice. I know the Metta Bhavana. I know mindfulness of breathing. There's something about sound which is sort of mysterious and taps into sort of this unknown sort of feeling of the unknown. And with Buddhist practice, we're always stepping into that. So we're always stepping into something more. We're always going deeper, like you were saying with your question. When we're going onto retreat and going deeper into our experience, we're always going into the unknown. Every time we commit further to practice, it's a step into the unknown. And mantra can be a really good way of evoking that feeling. I don't know if you know when you've got sound. I mean, some of you might have been on solitary retreat, or I remember when I go on solitary retreat, if you can realise how sound can be really like, you really want to label it. So sometimes at night, it's like, you're alone in your hut, you've been alone for a few days, so it's night, and then you just hear a twig snap outside your room, like, and you're like, the unknownness of it, suddenly there's all this fear, and you just want to know what it is. I remember one time just hearing loads of noise. I was like, what is that noise? I was full of, in bed, just, pulling it. And then I realised it was people. I could hear, oh, it's people, and I felt fine. I was like, oh, what was I scared of? There's sort of that fear of that unknown. So we always want to label it, and it's harder to label sound than with images. So the way we're going to chant the mantra. Also, you can label melody, like you can be like, oh, I'm familiar with that Tara mantra melody. So we're going to chant it without melody, and we're going to sort of chant it monotone, and we're going to chant it on the just each syllable or word by word on the out breath. So we're going to be a bit like a choir. We're all going to breathe in together. And then we're just going to breathe out that syllable, one word at a time. So I'll go through them. So if you're not familiar with the Tara mantra, it's Om, Tare, Tu Tare, Ture, Svaha. Om, Tare, Tu Tare, Ture, Svaha. Just join in if you don't know it. And I think what I'll do, we're gonna try and invoke this sort of aspect of the enlightened mind, Green Tara, a few different ways. We've got sound with the mantra, we've got the image on the shrine and the green, and I'm also going to read a short passage about Green Tara, evoking Green Tara. Okay, so this is a way of practicing sort of what Emily Odom was talking about. We're evoking these spiritual forces or trying to contact them through these different aspects. Visualization, sort of story, if you like, and mantric sound. Okay, so let's set up in meditation posture. Okay, so I'll read the passage. Just take a few moments to settle, and I'll read the passage. I'll chant through the mantra as I was describing once. You'll get the picture, and then we'll all join in after the first time round. Okay. In the pristine blue sky is a huge white cloud. The cloud is made of light, as is everything in this inner space. Just by looking at it, we are filled with serenity. It somehow radiates kindness. In the middle of that great white light is a pair of blue eyes gazing downwards. They are the most beautiful eyes the world has ever seen. As we look into those sapphire eyes, we see scenes reflected in them. We see women painfully giving birth to new generations of hope, and after a little space, those hopes lying, helpless as the day they were born, on their deathbeds. Reflected across those eyes, armies march in pomp and pageantry, and retreat back across them in tattered ranks, carrying their wounded and dying. There are men dressed in skins carrying clubs, men in chainmail brandishing swords, men in khaki bearing rifles, technicians in casual clothes looking at screens and pressing buttons. There are mud huts and great cities. There are lovers together, lovers separated, lovers who hate each other. The reflections go on forever. The scenes are not just of human beings, but also of animals and other forms of life. The reflections never stop. The more we watch, the more repetitive they seem to be. The faces change, the landscapes vary, but there is always birth, building, new hope, a brief flowering, then weakening, undermining, destruction, old age, sickness, death. The reflections become unclear, like images mirrored in a troubled lake. Tears form like dew in the exquisite eyes, and fall in two great streams. They fall to earth where they form a pool. They pour down endlessly in response to the sufferings mirrored in the tear-filled eyes. Gradually a great lake of tears forms. The waters in the centre of the lake are ruffled by something slowly emerging from their depths. Out of the lake of tears rises a pastel blue lotus flower of an extraordinary delicacy. A stream of tears falls into the soft heart of the lotus and transforms it into a white full moon disk. Slowly, just above the surface of the moon disk, jade green light appears. Its outlines become more definite, without gaining any solidity. We are watching the birth of a princess, a goddess, a bodhisattva. She is jade green in colour, clad in a rainbow skirt, with a meditation sash tied around her body. She is decked in precious jewels, bracelets, armlets, anklets, necklaces, earrings, and a tiara of gems. She is seated, her left foot resting on her right thigh in meditation posture. Her right foot steps gracefully down, and as it does so, a small pastel blue lotus and moon mat rise out of the lake to make a footrest. Her right arm reaches down, the back of her hand resting on her right knee. Her palm is open in a mudra of supreme giving. Her left hand is held in front of her heart, palm outwards, the thumb and ring finger together, so that the other three fingers point upwards. This mudra bestows protection and fearlessness through invoking the three jewels. Her thumb and ring finger delicately grasp the stem of a lotus, which curves upwards to open in a spray of blossoms by her left shoulder. There is a bud, a half-opened flower, and a fully opened blossom of pale blue. With flowing black hair, she is supremely beautiful. two. Sitting for a moment.